Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Elle Fanning makes the leap to become a ballerina in this animated adventure. Set in the 1880s, orphans Felicie, voiced by Elle Fanning, and Victor, voiced by Dane DeHaan in the international release and Nat Wolff in the US version, escape from their orphanage to go to Paris and pursue their dreams. Felicie aspires to become a ballerina while Victor wants to be an inventor. Felicie manages to work her way into the Paris Opera Ballet by assuming the identity of snobby rival Camille, voiced by Maddie Ziegler, who is forced to dance by her controlling mother, Regine, played by Julie Cannon in the international version and Kate McKinnon in the US cut, and competes to play the lead role in The Nutcracker. With the help of former prima ballerina Odette, voiced by Carly Rae Jepsen, can the inexperienced Felicie succeed with passion over technique. Ballerina is a French-Canadian animated co-production that was released late last year in many territories, including the UK, and yes, I'm aware I'm a little bit late to the game on this one, especially considering I saw this all the way back in January in cinemas, but the reason I'm still covering it now is because it hasn't been released in the US yet, where it's been purchased by the Weinstein Company and retitled Leap. And I can make sense of that title change because, speaking from experience, walking out to a box office and saying "one for ballerina" is one of the most humiliating things a person can do. But the changes made to the US version are more than simply a title alteration. The American version of the movie actually recasts a lot of the voice cast. Many have been replaced with bigger names in a lot of cases, especially in the smaller supporting roles. In the international version, Dane DeHaan was the male lead. In the US print, it's Nat Wolff, and there's a reason for that change which we'll get to later. Elsewhere, we have Mel Brooks, who most assuredly was not in the version that I saw, and there's also Kate McKinnon in not one, not two, but 3 different roles. And I have no idea how any of that pans out because no one has seen the Leap version yet. This is why I've been putting off the movie somewhat, because I haven't really been able to work out how much Leap differs from Ballerina. And knowing the Weinsteins, it could be any number of changes. The Weinsteins have a very long history of changing and re-altering movies to fit their own whims, and often the results can be almost unrecognisable in certain respects. So not only do we have a version that has a different voice cast, but it also could be entirely recut for all I know. So my criticisms of the movie are going to be mostly directed towards the international English language release, which I saw. And so I don't know how Leap fares by comparison. Hopefully, many of the same comments can be applied to that version of the movie, but just bear in mind that there are 2 different versions of this movie floating around and they could be wildly different for all I know. After all, the Weinsteins were the people that managed to transform the Magic Roundabout into whatever the hell Dougal was. One thing that will definitely remain consistent between both versions of this movie is the quality of the animation, which is very solid. Yeah, it's not quite up to the level of Pixar or DreamWorks or Illumination, the big major US studios, but really there isn't that much in it, which only goes to show how sophisticated computer animation has become, but also that this is a major production from a big French studio like Gaumont, and obviously the quality is really very much on screen, and especially in regards to the Parisian locales that make up a lot of this movie. You can tell that the animators spent a lot of time designing these sets that they use with a particular eye for detail. When Paris is first seen on screen, it looks tremendous. It looks like this busy, bustling metropolis that's full of people. It looks like an exciting world of possibility, and this is reiterated by the fact that at the time the film is set, much of it is still under construction. The Eiffel Tower is being built, the Statue of Liberty is being constructed before it gets shipped off to America. It feels like a land of opportunity for these 2 orphan characters. When Felicie first goes to the Palais Garnier, the Paris Opera School, for the first time, it is a fantastic sequence and lingers over every detail. You can tell the animators had extensively researched, and the film really allows you to drink it in. The one thing that did surprise me about this movie is that, considering it's a film called Ballerina, you think that dance would play much more of a pivotal role than it really does. In terms of the character designs, you can very much tell that they've designed the characters with the dance in mind, in that they very much are designed for motion, in that they all have dancer-esque proportions in many cases. So they have stick-thin bodies with slightly oversized heads. And the dancing in the movie was a big deal in the promotional campaign because this movie does have an actual dance choreographer. Auriel Dupont serves as the film's choreographer, and they actually keyframed animation and put that in the film. They use that as their reference point. And you can see that in the movie at several moments, but it's lacking in my mind a real standout dance set piece. I would have thought that at some point they were going to have a full routine just to really show off what the animators could do, and really, they didn't do that. The closest you get to a traditional dance routine like that is in the sequence where Felicie visits the Palais Garnier and she sees a dancer working on her routine. But elsewhere, a lot of the times, it's mostly just focused on training montages. There are individual moments of dance in the movie. There's a sequence where Felicie shows off her skills in a pub, for example. But the other real standout dance sequence in my mind is a sequence towards the end of the film where Camille and Felicie have a dance-off against each other. And I like the way the sequence initially played out because it's taking this idea of dance but playing it in a comical kind of way. And then they go and ruin it because they put an anachronistic pop song over the second half of it. That really annoyed me because that was such a good sequence and then they ruined it. We don't need to be reiterated. This is an inspirational moment. The story in Ballerina really isn't anything new. It's your typical follow your dreams narrative. And that's what Felicie is doing throughout the film. She is chasing her ambition of becoming a dancer. And as true of many stories of this kind, there's very much this class element going on throughout the movie. Especially in regards to the fact that Felicie is an orphan and her major antagonist is Camille, this rich, snobby, bratty kid who is being forced by a domineering mother to dance and is being pushed to be the best technical dancer that she can be. And that role is voiced by Maddie Ziegler. And I can't imagine it was a real stretch for her, considering that one of the things that she's best known for is appearing off the reality show Dance Moms, where she has a overbearing mother. Perfect casting, right? And she's not bad in this movie. She's perfectly fine for what it is. It's not a particularly challenging part. She actually has a better impression here than she does in a live-action role in The Book of Henry. Of course, that's because she had less lines in that movie than she does here. Either way, this sort of conflict through the movie of pure ambition versus technical skill, that is very much the underpinning towards what happens through the movie. And yeah, it's a little bit implausible, the events of the movie, in that this girl Camille has been training all her life, and Felicie, although she does have some raw talent and dance ability, she only picks up ballet during the course of the movie, so she's a complete newcomer at this. So it does stretch a little bit of credibility on that front, that these two would actually be in some way equal to each other. This class element runs all the way through the film in various different subplots. Victor, the male lead, the other orphan that escapes with Felicie, there's sort of this love triangle going on because once she gets into the school, there is this older boy who is going to be the lead in The Nutcracker. And yes, there is a certain amount of irony that Elle Fanning is voicing a ballerina aspiring to be in The Nutcracker when she was in that terrible 3D movie. And this boy named Rudy and Victor are battling for her affections. And of course, it's again this class element of this very well-to-do older boy and this orphan, essentially, that is a bit of a bumbling fool. Again, we'll get to him later. It's just that when it comes to these international animated films, really they're very conventional, except for the plot points that are a little bit weird in certain respects that just make you scratch your head like, huh? That doesn't really add up. And Ballerina does have a couple of particular plot points that make me go, wait, hang on. For example, I already mentioned that Felicie steals her way into the dance studio, and somehow this goes on for weeks at a time, this massive deception. It's not like people wouldn't know what Camille looks like, and so this is a major gaping hole in the plot, especially considering that she has no ballet skill whatsoever when she first appears in there. How she manages to survive for weeks at a time is a real implausibility in the plot, to put it mildly. And it's a bit of a weird thing to have identity theft as a major plot point in your children's movie. The other thing that I found really baffling is that Felicie eventually comes under the wing of a cleaner voiced by Carly Rae Jepsen, who it turns out is a former ballet dancer whose career was cut short by an injury, and she was taught by Camille's mother. And apparently, she blames her for an injury that wasn't in any way her fault, and punishes her by making her toil away around her house on her hands and knees with a bucket, a mop, and a sponge? What? That doesn't even make sense on the surface level. I mean, I'm not in the dance world, but I'm pretty sure the best use of your trained dancer is not having them scrub away in your house and worsening their injury, but I don't know, I'm not a caricatured evil stepmother type like the villain in this movie is. I'm pretty sure the best use of her would be as a dance teacher, and that's exactly what she is to Felicie. And you know what? She's pretty good at, considering that she manages to turn Felicie into a respectable ballet dancer in only a few weeks, or alternatively, a montage. And she essentially serves as the Miyagi to Felicie. Although instead of wax on, wax off, we now have you've got to leap in the air and ring the bell, but when you touch the ground, you can't make ripples in the puddle below, and once you do that, you're a proper ballet dancer. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Yeah, this training sequence makes up a lot of the movie, and it has a lot of slapstick pratfalls for the kids. It's a very conventional story. It hits all the beats that you would expect it to, but it is nice to see Felicie grow as a character through the movie, and to a certain extent the movie does accomplish that feel-good spirit that you would expect with a story like this. I think in terms of voice acting, Elle Fanning does a decent job as Felicie. When this movie came out, a lot of critics jokingly compared it to The Neon Demon, because of course both movies have Fanning in, and they're both about young girls competing against each other. Obviously that's where the comparisons end, because one is a family film, the other is a Nicholas Winding Refn movie, aside from the ironic fact that both of them were put out by Gaumont last year. But I think that comparison hits on something far deeper, in that I think that Fanning has outgrown roles like this. You look at her filmography over the last few years, and you can definitely tell that she's seeking out directors, and she's seeking out these complex, challenging, and here's the big word here, adult parts. She's no longer a child star, she's a fine actress in her own right, and a role like this in this movie, it actually feels like an abnormality these days. A couple of years ago this would have been the normal type of part that she would have played, and obviously I think what's happened is that she recorded this part a couple of years ago because that's par for the course for animation, and it's only just now come out. And it shows just how much Fanning has matured as an actress, that it just seems weird to see her in this kind of role again. She does sound too old for this kind of part in general, and I really do hope that this is the last time she plays a part like this, because she doesn't need to. Not when she's appeared in the likes of Live by Night, or Three Generations, or 20th Century Women. These are all very complicated roles, and this feels like a massive step back by comparison. But if you thought that Fanning seemed like a bit of an odd fit these days in this role, oh man. Oh man. You remember how I said earlier that Dane DeHaan was replaced in the US release? Which must seem like a really odd thing, considering that DeHaan is a name actor. He was in movies like Chronicle and Valerian and A Curse for Wellness. Well, the reason they recast the role in the American version is because he's terrible. He's genuinely awful. And he's so bad that I actually feel bad that he's being replaced in the American version, because I wanted people to see just how egregiously miscast he is in this movie. DeHaan's bread and butter is normally playing these quite sinister, maybe sullen, introverted characters. In this film, he's playing this young, hyperactive inventor boy who is a constant slapstick magnet. And so DeHaan, whose range is definitely not that, spends the entire movie raising his voice and doing it like this. "Ooh, I'm Victor! I want to be an inventor!" Just embarrassing. It's really awful stuff. It's jaw-dropping. I don't think I've ever seen a voice actor, especially a name one, so blatantly wrong for a role, at least in a very long time. It is breathtaking stuff. I don't think the script helps. The character of Victor in general is one that I didn't have a lot of time for. You can clearly tell the conception of this character is, okay, we've got a movie called Ballerina, but we don't want to limit our audience to just young girls, we want to get boys in there. So let's have this wacky inventor character. He's meant to be really smart, because obviously he is an inventor, he can actually make things. It's not like he's grossly incompetent, he's just very accident prone. But I think the writers don't really understand how that works, because his big arc through the movie is that he wants to build a flying machine, he wants to build wings, okay? So the first stage of this is a joke in their escape scene, in that he pulls out the wings and he goes, "I call these chicken wings!" And the reason that he calls them that is because he based them off of the chickens they had in the yard of the orphanage. You would have thought if he spent so much time studying chickens, the fact that they didn't fly would have been immensely obvious to him, but apparently that needed Felicie to tell him that right before they used them. What? It's a gag that makes no sense. When they arrive in Paris very early on, they realise that they don't really need this character around for a little bit, and so they have to contrive a way to get rid of him. And on not one, but two separate occasions, he slapsticks out of a scene. They exit him via slapstick. As far as the film as a whole goes, Ballerina will be enjoyed by its target audience, which is obviously not me, but young children, especially boys and girls that are into dance. And if you got a wet afternoon where you want to take the kids out to the cinema or put something on the TV, you could certainly do far worse than this. It passes the time fairly harmlessly, aside from a climax that has the villain chasing Felicie with homicidal intent. And I'm not exaggerating for the sake of a joke, that's genuinely what happens. But aside from weird wonkiness like that, it's a fairly pleasant animated movie for children that's very much catered towards them. There's little really aimed at adults in this movie. That might change in the US version with the addition of McKinnon and Brooks, but I doubt it, considering that this is the kind of movie that has a fart joke and someone getting in the nuts in the first 15 minutes. But really, Ballerina or Leap, it's fairly innocent fare. It's an animated movie with a nice optimistic message for kids, and sometimes that's exactly what you want. Ballerina or Leap is a fairly harmless animated movie that should be passable for its intended audience, but it has little appeal for their parents. On a technical level, there are moments where the animation looks great and very fluid, even if it's lacking a standout dance sequence and it's not quite up to the same level as Pixar or DreamWorks. The story, on the other hand, though, is a very basic follow your dreams tale that takes some very weird detours like many of these European animations do. Elle Fanning is well cast as the lead, but she's at the point where she's outgrown roles like this, and the voice acting feels a little bit wonky, especially from a spectacularly miscast Dane DeHaan as the uncouth inventor best friend involved in constant slapstick. No wonder they recast him for the American version. Add in some pop songs and crude gags that feel out of place, and you've got a family film that steps to a familiar beat. If you like this review, you can leap over to my Patreon where you can see my reviews early among other perks, but until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.